Welcome everybody to Mochen La'ira online smicha. I have with us myself. I have two chashuva young bachrim, young but energetic. One is
Yeah.
Eliezer Altshul, and two brothers actually, and Uriel Altshul. Now we spend together twice a week, and we learn different topics in halacha. So interesting topic that came up over the last couple of weeks that we'd like to share with the public is a topic that might not be so relevant as of now, but it's a topic that in the future will definitely become very relevant. And some have even gone as saying, trying to quote a statement that's written by Rav Moshe Feinstein. There's a statement in one of his shuvas when he was asked in the earlier years about a microwave. So he said, Rav Moshe responded by saying, even though right now microwave is not the biggest question, because at that time that he was asked, it wasn't yet very popular. But he says he's sure, based on what he sees, it's going to become a very popular thing. And therefore, it's very important that people should understand how it works and how whatever halachic issues may get involved. And this is in Igros Moshe, Eirech Chaim Chele Gimel Simen Nun Beis. So the same is there are going to be some topics that we're going to be discussing over the next couple of weeks. As of right now, it's not very popular, but it's definitely something that's available, and there are people that are searching for it. But eventually, I think the goal in the secular world and the world in general is to make it more popular for different reasons, as we will discuss. So at least I'm not here to paskin halacha l'maisa. At least we should be aware as Torah from a Yidden, those who follow Shulchan Aruch, follow the will of the Eibishter, to know what to be aware when these new items come along. One of the items that we'll be discussing today, and I'm very happy to introduce again Eliezer and Uriel Altshul. They're young in spirit, but in mind and in intellect. You give them a slice of homework to do, they come back prepared with reports from journals. As you'll hear, you'll be very impressed. These are new items that are just new in the last couple of years, and they've done good research to be able to make the standard person try to understand what halachic issues might there be. And the topic that we're going to discuss today is cultured meat. There is a new fathom, a new style, and we're soon going to ask exactly why the fathom is that way, why people are looking that direction. But there is a movement to produce laboratory meat now. But I'm going to direct to the question to either one of you, but as we go along. And whoever feels the first one that wants to jump in and answer that question, please feel free. And say until everybody gets accustomed to whose voice is what. Say hi. I'm Eliezer.
Okay.
I'm Uriel. Okay.
All right.
The first question that comes to mind, Begashmias, is why? Why are there companies? Why are there laboratories? Why are there people looking to do this? What are they looking to gain, and what is the benefits with these laboratory produced meats?
Well, me, Eliezer. Well, there's many reasons why people are starting to look to culture meat and developing it. One of the main reasons is to reduce agriculture and livestock consumption. So to explain, they say that the demand of meat throughout the world is going to in the year 2050, the demand for meat will double than what it is today. Right now, we are living in interesting times that the world population, the human population, has never been higher. So the consumption of meat has also never been higher. Many people are concerned that we will run out of livestock. We will simply run out of meat to produce for the demand of meat. And as I said, the demand of meat, they expect that the demand of meat will double in the year 2050, And to quote Mark Post, he says, without a
2015? Did you say the year 2015?
2050, it will double. In other
Five
words,
oh,
5-0, yes.
50, yes. It will double.
Yeah.
And without, to quote Mark Post, who is one of the leading innovators in the field of culture meat, without any substantial improvement alternatives, it is likely that demand will increase and the price of meat will also increase. Simple economics, as demand increases and supply decreases, the making meat would become nearly unaffordable for the large population. There's also
So
another.
once
Yeah.
I once, but if that's the only reason, men have survived years and years without certain food items. If they won't have meat because it won't be available, so as much as good as you like to eat it, and sometimes it's a mitzvah to eat it, but if it's not available, it's not available.
Well, people want it to be
Why this crisis? Why this crisis?
why this crisis? Because nonetheless, the demand will still remain, and people people in the end would want meat. Really, what's
Are there any health benefits
There are. Well, there's a couple of other benefits. First of all, there's environmental benefits, as the consumption of livestock. The UN stated that animal production, the production for meat, is one of the major causes of air and water pollution and global warming. So many want to create culture meat to be an alternative that will be also healthier and beneficial for the environment and not cause as much water pollution. As well, there's worth mentioning the ethic standpoint of it. PETA is very pro for it, but then there's also interesting side effects, side benefits that can happen. For example, if you create your own meat, then you can make meat that is more beneficial for man, provided with more healthier aspects, add more vitamins, more more correct fatty acids, omega-3 acids, and make the meat as well healthier. As well, you can use it to, for example, get it sent to space. Right now, you can't send meat to space, so you can make meat that could be more useful for the human behavior and how humans consume meat.
And so, if there's any sicknesses, chash v'shalom, that are associated to the abundance of eating meat,
Hmm.
or cholesterol, or fat, or whatever,
Exactly.
that will also be minimized, or none if you take if you culture meat. Is that
Yeah, if
correct?
you replace your diet for culture meat.
Okay, so that's the reason of why there is this movement. There are people doing it, and let's shift over to the next question. Okay, imitation or replacements for meat. We could go now to the store, and the consumers have seen a lot of things. They've seen soy meat. They've seen all different types of things. And incidentally, it's not only meat that this story is happening with. I know that there are organizations that are growing laboratory fruits and vegetables. Fruits and vegetables are also a movement.
Yeah.
So my question is, soy meat. Nobody made a big fuss. You can make anything looking like a hot dog,
Yeah.
anything looking like a burger. What is unique about cultured meat?
Okay, this is Uriel speaking. The the goal of cultured meat is to recreate regular meat that's grown from an animal. To do this, they need to take cells, specific type of cells that are found within animals, and put it inside a laboratory, or specifically a bioreactor, to make it grow into a sellable and profitable and edible piece of meat. And it's not going to be some kind of replacement. It will be a copy of actual meat, because it is taking the original cells from real animals and just let it and constantly recreate it, so we can get actual meat, not imitation like soy meat.
So soy meat is made out of soy. It has nothing to
Yeah.
do with meat. The benefit. So this is like we would say in Yiddish, nishtahin nishtaher. Nishtahin nishtaher means to say it's not meat as what we know meat to be like,
Hmm.
and it's also not meat because it does come from the animal. Is that
Yes.
correct?
Yeah.
So 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 even though it comes from the animal and there is meat, yet all the benefits that your brother mentioned before will still be there, correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
So in your words, is it meat or is it not meat?
Well, that depends how you define it. And this is actually a problem that is happening in many, for example, states in here in the U.S. in trying to implement laws to prohibit for the product to be even called meat because they are afraid that if this will become mass produced and highly consumable, it will overthrow the meat industry, the naturally grown meat industry. For example, in Missouri, Missouri was the first state to prohibit plant and lab grown alternatives to be actually called what it is. And in Mississippi and South Dakota, both signed bills that they're both making
Mhm.
bills to prevent this from happening. And there are
Prevent, oh, hold on, prevent the production or to prevent
no
the
No,
to
naming?
prevent.
if I can.
Uh, uh,
So they, in many states, as we speak, have already signed on what is called the Real Meat Act, saying that in order to produce something in like a grocery store and call it meat, it has to come from an actual carcass. Um, so, for example, Missouri was the first state to do this, and there was a court case against the Missouri state called the Turtle Island Foods versus the Missouri court case, where they stated that where Missouri won, saying that these products, the cell cultured meat, cannot be called meat. And then Mississippi, South Dakota, and Montana followed with as well. Now Arizona, Arkansas, Colorado, Illinois, and many other states prohibit culture meat to be called meat, actual meat, because it does not come from a carcass and rather from a
Okay,
lab.
so how about soy meat?
Soy meat,
You know,
same situation. This also applied to plant-based meat. And
so
well,
so the soy meat came around way before. So
yeah,
that ruling started with them with
it
the soy meat production, and it just now became a new question because this is closer to the carcass, closer.
yeah.
And I'll tell you what comes to my mind.
Mhm.
There is a halacha, a Torah Isser of Nidarim. The Isser is that if you pledge or you promise, commit not to do certain things, you got
Mhm.
mhm.
mitzvahs for Tishma. You got to keep the words that you out of your mouth. So,
Okay.
and then the halacha goes on to understand when a person commits, verbalizes, says something, we have to know clearly what he committed to do or not to do, because in his words of his mouth is lays the commitment,
Okay.
right?
Mhm.
So if a person were to say right now, I am not eating meat,
Mhm.
according to how you two understand it, would that include not, that he would be prohibited to eat also cultured meat? Because I got to give you a ruling.
Mhm.
The ruling is that in the Darim, in all these issues of the Darim, Holchin achalashim b'nei Adam,
Yeah.
the words that a person says, we decide, conclude what he meant based on how the standard person speaks. What does a
Yeah.
person
Yes.
mean when he says that word? So
Absolutely.
what's your hunch? If a person were to say now that I'm not going to eat meat,
Okay.
would that prohibit him from? I'm not asking you, obviously,
Yeah.
the Torah view. I'm asking you, what would you think? Would that, if somebody on the street would say meat
Mhm.
based on these court rulings, would
Okay.
that include cultured
Cultured
meat?
meat. Well, may I?
Okay.
I guess. Well, first of all, it's a little too soon to say, considering that cultured meat is not in production. You cannot go to the grocery store and buy cultured meat, so you cannot identify what people would say. However, according to a lot of the regulations that are happening with government regulations, they prohibit it to be called meat. As well, many PETA and many vegetarians are one of the main causes, one of the leading causes of the production of cultured meat. And because they also want to eat meat, they also want to create a meat-like product that they can consume, considering that they also themselves said we will not eat meat, but they're willing to eat cultured meat. So, first of all, it's too soon to say, but second, most probably from how it looks like, they seem to say that cultured meat is not meat. The world seems to agree on
Just
that.
like soy milk, just like soy meat.
Yeah.
Yeah. However, the producers of cultured meat are fighting against this.
They
That's
want
why
it to be called. They want it to be labeled meat,
meat,
regular meat.
Yes.
because otherwise, in order to create a new vocabulary for your new product, that very much reduces the consumption of that product, and will
Okay,
then
so let's
make it
move.
harder. Yeah.
Let's move on. Let's move on to the next one. In the Gemara, we find, and this is a lot of the discussion, halacha discussion, when they bring these type of topics on, they try to connect it to stories in the Gemara
Hmm.
where miracles have happened and food items have miraculously appeared. What brachas were made? Were they kosher or were not kosher because it didn't go through the normal channels?
Hmm.
Hmm.
Obviously, if me and you two are speaking about this, we're not talking about a miracle. We're talking about a hands-on
Yeah.
Yeah.
uh, laboratory effect.
Real
So
things.
it's not a question that it fell from the sky. A piece of meat fell from the sky. Somebody somewhere learned enough and figured out enough how this item could reproduce and make this item. A
Hmm.
could make B. So it's not a question of a miracle. It's a question
Yeah.
of, let's get that out of the way.
Yeah.
It's not a miracle. It's a reproduction in a way that Teva, nature, allows it to happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is real
So,
things.
so now, before we go into the halachic shilas, could you tell us, either one of you, based on the research you did, how is the reproduction done? What are they taking? What are they taking to kickstart it? And what is it made into?
Hmm. Okay. The way that cultured meat is done, as I said before, is that you take cells from the animal. Now there are different types of cells that you can take, and there are specifically four that are most commonly used, and those are embryonic stem cells, adult stem cells, myosatellite cells, and cells. And each one, and these four types of cells are most prevalent because they have high rates of reproducing. They have high rates of proliferation, and that makes it much easier to cultivate compared to something like a nerve cell, because it takes a very long because nerve cells rarely ever reproduce. The most common ones that they prefer to use is myoblast cells, which are types of muscle cells, because embryonic cells are, first of all, stem cells are very hard to acquire, but there's also the problem that they're not actual meat cells. They create the basis for a cell, and then it becomes a specific type of cell. It can either become a skeletal cell, a muscle cell, or a nerve cell. Now, once they acquire the cells, they place the cells in a growth medium. A growth medium is a liquid solution which is filled with all the necessary nutrients for a cell and all the growth factors that the cell needs in order to constantly reproduce and to create more cells. And the cell and the growth media are placed in bioreactors. And bioreactors can range from the size of a small bowl to the size of a boiler. And bioreactors are there to recreate an environment for the cells to grow in. So it has the right temperature. It provides all, and it helps transfer more nutrients and more growth factors for them to constantly grow, and to also and to make the cells to grow into a more solid and three-dimensional shape. They perform a method called scaffolding, which is that you take a solid object and put it between the cells, and they will grow around that object, and that will help it become more stable, and also help them create blood vessels, which is something they're struggling now. Interestingly, an Israeli company considered using 3D printing to give the meat better texture. Now, the problem is that a lot of the process and a lot of the how what they use and what they put in is still a trade secret and not shared to the public. So there's a lot that we don't know. There are also things they're still not able to do, like to create bones or to create blood vessels, which is something they are struggling now and trying to recreate.
And you do want to create blood vessels?
Yes, because that will allow
Why?
it to make it a much more solid piece of meat. Because right now it only grows to these very thin strands, and it becomes into this huge mess, kind of like ground beef. And so you only get like a hamburger-like product, not like a steak kind of product, which requires blood vessels and scaffolding in order to become a much more solid shape.
Okay, so I want to stop you for a
Yeah.
moment and point out 3 points, I think, halachic issues that come out.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Halachic issue number one is where, when you're saying they take these cells, where are these cells being taken from? I mean, you gave me different cells. It's a cell from an animal. Do you know if
Yes.
it's any animal? Any animal could,
Any.
Well,
could
yeah.
huh?
Yes, any animal.
Any animal. And the tests they have done, you know, if they've done it from which animal have they taken out the cells?
Uh, do you know?
Well, which animal they taken out? Which
I,
animal
my
they?
where I'm heading
Okay.
is, how do we know it's taken out from a kosher species?
Well,
Could maybe the animal, maybe it's a chazer cell.
they don't mix cells as far as I understand. They don't like take a chazer cell and then a cow cell and then mix them together. They
I
do.
understand, but how do you know when you see the finished product? How do you
Mhm.
know from what cell it came from what animal it came
Well,
from?
then
Well, that's
you probably
market.
have to do the regulations, the whole cautious regulations, but that's
Ask them to like label it and ask them to identify it.
I'm guessing they don't specify they I mean as of
And
now
you would
again.
you would never know if the taste of the chazer cell, the
Yeah.
outcome would be different than the taste of the cow cell.
Yeah.
Correct?
Hmm.
So the first red flashing light that comes up,
Mhm.
the first red
Sorry.
flashing light that comes up is, how do we know that the finished product that they're selling you originated from a kosher animal? It could be it originated from a chazer or any non-kosher animal. Correct?
Yeah.
Yes.
Well,
Uh,
but
yeah.
they don't mix. At least they're not.
From what we know, they don't mix cells.
Yeah. They.
But what is mixing? Mixing doesn't make a difference. It could be it's fully chazer cells.
Yeah.
That's why there needs to be again regulations and proper marketing, but and rabbinical supervision, obviously.
We're guessing.
Well, you have to understand the rabbinical supervision for this will be so much less than the rabbinical supervision as there is now. Right now, the rabbinical supervision has to be for a shechita, has to
Mhm.
be for the malicha, has to be for the removing the chalev, has to make sure there's no exchanges. When you're dealing with that finished product that looks like a soy meal, we once we eliminate the major issues, there's very little. It seems to me there's very little hashgacha involved anymore.
Hmm.
All right, let's go to first point. The first flashing light is from where it stems from. right?
Mm-hmm.
Does it have a kosher animal? And is it not a kosher animal? Let's say they only would do it from kosher animals, from cows or goats or whatever.
Yes.
Do they take these cells out from the animal while the animal is still alive, or these cells come out after it died?
I mean, I know from what I've read, they at least prefer to take it out from a living animal because if they take it out from a dead animal, it's kind of it's
It makes the process a lot harder.
not only that, it's quite I can't think of the word, but it's contradicting to the reason why they're making cultured cells, which is not to kill the animal. They want to kill
Ah,
as they want to kill as little animals in the process. They want no animals to be harmed.
but a dead animal cells could reproduce.
It is, I believe it would be possible, but it would probably be a lot
Yeah.
more difficult.
Yes, but also worth actually they stopped doing that. But before they did take cells from premature cows, or they would take they would take a pregnant cow and then they will kill the cow inside pretty much and take a cell from it. It was called FBS or something like that. They stopped doing that, but they used to do that. But they
Okay,
try not to
so
take any animals.
so let's
No
go through
animal.
Yes.
again some of the red flags that have to be discussed.
Yeah.
Discussion number one is, where does the cell come from?
Yes.
Now, some might say, who cares?
Hmm.
Because we're not eating the actual meat of the chazer. We just took a cell from the chazer,
Hmm.
Hmm.
and the cell reproduced into something else. So for this, you have to mention the Mishnah in Maseches Bechoros Perek Vav, Mishnah Beis, where over there the Gemara goes on. The over there it says Hayoytze min hatame tame, Hayoytze min hatar tar. That whatever comes from a tame, obvious, even though it's nothing, it's minute, but it's something that comes out of the from the tame, within the tame, has a din of tame.
Hmm.
Because we a lot many ways you could connect it to chicken and eggs. I
Hmm.
mean, eggs and chicken,
Hmm.
milk from a behemoth,
Yeah.
right? The same thing, but the behemoth is not kosher as of right now,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
and it produces milk. I'm going to use that analogy soon again. That the milk is also kosher and it's not aver min achai, even though the animal is still alive. The eggs are not aver min achai, even though the chicken is still alive,
Yeah.
because
Yes.
there are exemptions to that rule. Either it's not a real aver, which leads to the next point. It leads to the point, even though it's yotze min atame, would there be a question because of what you said that the animal is, even if it will be yotze min atar, sorry, because the animal is alive, would it be considered a aver min achai? So some
Okay.
try to compare it to the eggs and the liquid and the milk. They come
Hmm.
out from a living creature, a living animal, and yet we're allowed to eat it.
Hmm.
Hmm.
So, so the two things that are up for discussion is, where is the cell come from? A kosher animal, non-kosher animal. Once we decide that we know for sure it's from a kosher animal, then would it be considered Eiver min achai or not?
Hmm.
Right? So
Okay.
we're going through processes. Now, could you say that despite the fact that there might be a problem cell, compare it to the finished product, how many, this I have to ask you in the process, how many cells produce a pound of meat, 10 pounds of meat?
Okay.
In comparison, what's the size of the amount of cells to the finished product?
Um.
From the amount they acquire to the amount that is produced.
Yeah.
Well, it's infinite, really. But as of
How many?
now, you can, in other words, you can get an infinite amount of infinite amount of meat from one cell. If you take out one
Really?
cell, yeah. Well,
Yeah,
You take out
that's
cells.
one cell?
Well, yeah, the cell constantly reproduces. A cell becomes
that,
then two cells. Then those two cells becomes four cells.
and
So some use that as a loophole, that because the cell is so insignificant, even if it's made into, even if it's a problematic cell,
Mm-hmm.
we know that throughout halachas and taruvas, we know the rule of bittul. Things
Mhm.
become batal b'roiv, things
Yeah.
become batal b'shishim. if you're telling me one cell keeps on producing, and by the time you have a finished product, that original cell, let's say from the chazer,
Okay.
let's say from the Aver Mechai, is so lost, is so diluted, so gone. So maybe that's not an issue. From the other hand, the question is, we know certain isurim, despite their size, don't become batal. What is it? Which isur doesn't become batal despite the small amount of size? Yeast or rennet,
Mhm.
because they are the mainstay of the reproduction.
Mm.
Without rennet, you can't even though you put in a small amount of rennet for hundreds of gallons of milk, but without it, there is no cheese.
Okay.
Without yeast, there is no challah, there is no bread. So even
Mhm.
though it's insignificant, you can't say it's not there. So
Mhm.
some want to use that as a discussion about if it would be an isser, would it become bottle when it's being reproduced? Now,
Mhm.
speaking about reproduction, um, so the animal, the cell you took from either a living animal or a dead animal. If it's a living animal, there was no shchita to
Yeah.
that
Mhm.
animal. Maybe it doesn't need shchita,
Okay.
right?
Okay.
Someone I've seen some say that taking the cell from a living animal is no different than making a blood test. A blood test, if
Interesting.
not drawing blood from the animal, is not considered eva min achai. You obviously can't drink the blood anyways because you're not allowed to drink blood. But
Mhm.
as an eva min achai, it's not. The same thing is taking a cell, however it's done, um, is not a problem. Now, at the same point, um, if the animal was a kosher animal and it was shechted properly, and then you took out the cell, another angle comes up.
Okay.
Does it mean that because the mama, so because the animal was shechted, now when you're taking out a part and you're starting a new life cycle, does the next thing have to be shechted? Does
Mhm.
Huh.
does that make sense? So
Yeah.
some want to say it's no different than a ben pekua. A ben pekua is that if you shecht an animal and inside in the stomach you find a living baby, halachically the baby doesn't have to be shechted. It
Okay.
already passed the test by by the mother being shechted. Other issues come up based on the final production. So please tell me, what does the final production look like? What does the final production taste like? Because more halachic issues come up.
Well, um, how it looks like? It
Yeah.
looks like at least there hasn't been a lot of tastings of the current product. However, in 2013, it was produced as a patty and was worth um, like $20,000 a patty. It
Yeah.
Okay.
looks like it looks okay. It looks like it says instead of it being juicy and soft, it resembled more like a dense protein cake. But this is in 2013. As of now, they can make little ground beefs and uh, like real pieces of steaks where they are at least the goal is to make them taste like meat.
Uh,
The goal is to make it taste like meat and to make it look like meat.
all right. So are there any concerns of it being bloody and what the status of that blood is? Because a regular piece of meat, you have to extract the blood. You got to do malicha.
Yes.
Would this be a discussion in the
I like
future
that.
about if
You
it's
want to?
real blood?
Um, well,
Do you know anything? As of
in
right now, you said there's no blood.
yes, there as of now there is no. They're trying to avoid using blood, but
Yeah.
they're also trying to make it so it can create blood vessels like veins. So I don't know what this would mean, but but my guess is that they also want to create a sort of fake blood inside the meat that will circulate through the growing, so that the meat will grow better. Sort of like
Yeah.
when it's in the growth medium, it will start creating its own sort of blood.
transfer nutrients and make sure that the
But
meat.
how about the taste?
Taste, again, they're trying to make, as of now, it tastes kind of like meat, but their goal is to make it taste as exactly like
Meat.
meat and
Well,
look
So
like
let me
meat.
tell you. So let me tell you a halachic dispute in today's poskim.
mm-hmm.
Rav Herschel, he said that because the final product doesn't taste like meat, even though it's made from the cell of
Mm-hmm.
behemoth, however it's produced, because it doesn't taste like meat, there isn't a shaila of it being fleshik, and you would be allowed to eat it milchik. And he has different proofs why he says so. One of the things he said is only meat that was produced through the natural way of a birth of a living mother as a normal way of doing it. That is where all the halachas of basar fleshik applies. However, there are other poskim, Usher Weiss paskins. He paskins no, that as long as as uh, as you say, the goal is that it should taste like meat, and if you were to check it, even a laboratory, sometimes it's so close you couldn't differentiate between this produced meat, cultured meat, and real meat. And he bases it on the Gemara in Menachos Daf Samach Tesam at Beis, where the Gemara says chitim sheyardu ba'avim. There are some wheat that came down in the clouds, whatever it is. Even though Tosfos says that it came through a nest, a miracle, it produced it. But the Gemara asked if those wheats you're allowed to bring as part of Shtei Lechem. So the Gemara says that why was there even a question? Because chitim it is chitim, but it came through a nest. So the fact that the Gemara even allowed the question to enter that it's chitim, the same as this with our meat. It is basar. It is basar for all the halachas we need. Another story in the Gemara Sanhedrin Daf Nun Tes Amud Beis. The Gemara says Rav Shimon bar Chalafta was walking somewhere, and lions came towards him, and they were roaring and they were hungry. And so Rav Shimon bar Chalafta said a pasuk, and two pieces of food appeared in front of him, and he threw it to the lions to eat.
Mm-hmm.
So they ate one of them, and the second one was left behind. So Rav Shimon bar Chalafta took this piece of food, meat, whatever it was, and he came to shul, and he says, "Tell me, this what I'm holding is a tameh or a tar? Is it kosher or not?" So they answered, "Ein davar tameh yored min hashamayim." Nothing impure comes down from heaven. So the question the proof you could use this Gemara. The Gemara they responded that saying, "Ein davar tameh," but they didn't say it's not basar. What do you? It doesn't have to be shechted. It looks like they said, "Hey, it is basar," but despite the fact that it's basar, it's tameh. No davar tameh comes from Shemayim. That comes down from Shemayim. If so, he tries to use that as an example, as a raya, that all these reproduced meats, obviously, if you're not using soy or imitation ingredients, you're using an ingredient that starts from the source of the animal, even though it's being reproduced in the laboratory, he holds it has a din of flesh, and it's fleshik, Other Rav Shechter argued. Now, obviously, I'm not going into the discussion once we have the ruling. Even if you paskin that it's not fleshik, it could appear to look like fleshik. To a standard person, if it looks as good as a regular steak, and then somebody walks by, sees you drinking it with a cup of milk, there's a whole new ball game, the whole new issue of maris ayin. things, how you have to avoid people being misled by your actions. But Marasayin is halacha for itself. We are talking now just about
Kasha.
the halacha of what's right, what's wrong, is it meat or not?
Yeah.
Another thing that was very much comparable to this issue really came about years ago when they were discussing gelatin. Gelatin is also made of production from a processed part of the animal. And it's not from the meat part, it's from the skin, from the bones, or whatever it is from the animal. And there's a big discussion because it's reproduced, and that's not reproduced. Because by the time the final product is available, the gelatin, the way it, the source of where it came from, even if it came from a chazer, you don't have any remnants of it. So that was the big discussion. Some said by the time you look at the gelatin, there's no more chazer left. Most of the places were still machmir, and therefore they want gelatin from a kosher source. We have another example is bees and honey.
Yeah.
So this is a very interesting topic. How something in Gashmi and Salem Haza could have so many components to it in kashrus. Is it kosher or not kosher? Does it have to be shechted? Is it milchik? Is it fleshik? What happens if this cultured meat gets lost in a pot of milk? How are you going? Is it fleshik or not? Is there any other things that you could think about where this thing could play a role? Another piece of information that will help anybody listening to this talk to do further research.
Well, can't really think of one on the spot. But I mean, for me, the interesting question is with blood, with dam, because they
Yeah.
are thinking of creating blood. Blood is very useful for the growth of a piece of meat because it can transfer nutrients, and that's why they want to make fake blood cells. They want to make fake blood.
Now you have to know if that's fake blood or that's a reproduction of the original blood. That just opens up another can of
Yeah.
Yes.
Which
worms.
I don't know. I think
As of now, I don't think they have achieved that, but that and also creating bones is one of the things that they're trying to do.
But bones nobody eats.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it gives a lot of people consider that the bone having like the bone with the meat gives them more satisfying feel,
More like a T-bone steak
or chicken wings.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I have a. I want to finish off with some very thankful finishing words. I want to thank you for your research. Thank you. You're Baruch Hashem. You're two intelligent young bachrim. Very nice. And we'll hopefully the people listening to this eventually will this will enlighten them and will give them a little more understanding of what's going on. And this is the first of many topics we're doing. Hopefully the next Tuesday we'll actually do civet coffee. You do your preparation for that, and then we'll do the same thing. I'll do the same thing for our next topic.